Hi, I'm Adrian. At Christmas dinner, my brother got the keys to a brand new Mercedes.
Me?
I got a cracked mirror and a note that said, "Take a good look at yourself." They laughed. I smiled. And that night, something inside me went silent. Years later, when the business I built made headlines, that same family came knocking, asking me for a job. Funny, isn't it? The same people who taught me I wasn't enough now wanted a place in the empire they said I'd never build. But tell me, what do you give to the ones who broke your reflection? Because I had an answer waiting. Christmas in Fort Worth always looked like something out of a holiday catalog. My mother, Marla, was meticulous about the details: cranberry garlands around the banister, candles that smelled like cinnamon and pine, and the same porcelain angel sheet placed on top of the tree since before I was born. The house glowed that evening, soft and warm, the kind of glow that tells outsiders, this family has it all together. Inside, the air felt heavier than the sweet scent of ham and butter rolls. We'd gathered in the living room after dinner, bellies full, faces flushed from wine and the fire. Church friends and a few distant cousins lingered, laughing too loud, waiting for the grand finale, the family gift exchange. My brother, Travis, took center stage as he always did. He had that charm that made people lean in when he spoke. He was the one who never failed to deliver. At least, that's what my parents told anyone who'd listen. I sat on the arm of the couch, holding a mug of cocoa that had gone cold. Dad cleared his throat. "Well," he said, grinning at Travis, "we might as well start with the man of the hour." Everyone chuckled like it was a running joke. I didn't remember when the man of the hour title became permanent, but it fit him now. Travis opened the long black box my parents handed him. His grin widened, and I saw the silver shimmer of a Mercedes key glint in the light. Gasps filled the room. Someone actually clapped. "Oh my God, you didn't," Travis said, though he was already pocketing the key. Dad laughed, proud. "You've worked hard. You deserve it. I want my son driving something that tells the world who he is." I sipped my cocoa. It tasted bitter now. Then Mom looked at me. "Go on, honey. Yours is next." A small box sat near her feet. The wrapping was lovely, silver paper, red ribbon, but the size of it told me all I needed to know. When I pulled the ribbon loose, the laughter still lingered in the air. Inside was a compact mirror, its glass cracked in one clean, diagonal line. A yellow sticky note was stuck on top. "Take a good look at yourself." For a second, I thought it was a joke. I waited for Mom's voice to rise, telling everyone it was just something silly. But no one said anything. Then a laugh, quiet, uneasy, broke the silence. My aunt, trying to lighten the mood. Mom smiled, the way she did when she wanted to appear gracious. "It's symbolic," she said lightly. "Maybe it'll inspire some reflection." The laughter that followed was half-hearted. I smiled too, though it felt like my face might crack to match the mirror. My hands were steady, but my chest burned. I could feel eyes on me, some curious, others pitying. "That's thoughtful," I said, forcing a laugh that sounded like someone else's voice. Dad leaned back in his recliner, satisfied. "It's about time she sees herself the way others see her." The sentence landed sharp, but I said nothing. The moment passed. Someone poured more wine, and the conversation shifted back to Travis and his new car. When the last guest left and the house grew quiet, I gathered the plates from the coffee table. Mom followed me into the kitchen, humming to herself. "I think that went nicely, don't you?" she said. I nodded, rinsing the glasses.
Sure.
"Real nice." She didn't notice the tremor in my voice. "You know, I thought the mirror was perfect. You've always been imaginative. Sometimes a little too much. Maybe this will help ground you." "Right," I said, my back still to her. "Very grounding." Travis wandered in, unwrapping another chocolate truffle. "Hey, don't take it the wrong way. Mom just means you could use some direction. Not everyone's meant to save the world." "I never said I was," I replied quietly. He chuckled. "Then what do you want, Adrian?" I turned off the faucet and faced him. Maybe just not to be the family punchline. He shrugged, easy and unbothered. You're too sensitive. Always have been. Mom touched his arm, smiling at me like she was smoothing over a misunderstanding. Don't take it to heart, sweetheart. We tease because we love. I dried my hands and left the kitchen without another word. Later that night, in the guest room, I found the mirror again. I turned it over in my hands, the crack running across my reflection like a scar. I thought about how much effort my family put into appearances, polished smiles, perfect dinners, spotless reputations, and how easily they dismissed the things that didn't fit that image. Me. The moonlight caught the broken glass, and for a moment I saw two versions of myself staring back. One looked like the girl they thought I was, compliant, invisible, grateful for scraps of affection. The other looked tired of pretending. Down the hall, laughter drifted from Travis's room, probably him on the phone, bragging about the car. I placed the mirror face down on the nightstand. Maybe I'd laugh about this someday. Maybe. The next morning, we ate leftovers for breakfast. Travis offered to give me a ride home, waving his new car key like a trophy. I declined. He shrugged and left early, the sound of the Mercedes engine humming through the window as it disappeared down the road. Mom hugged me at the door. We just want what's best for you, she said softly. I smiled, the polite kind. I know. You always do. Outside, the air was crisp. I stood in the driveway watching my breath fade into the winter sky, clutching the cracked mirror inside my coat pocket. The metal felt cold against my skin, sharp at the edge, like a secret I wasn't ready to let go of. When I got home, I set it on my dresser. It caught the morning light, and for some reason, I didn't move it. I just stared, long enough to see the crack turn the sunlight into a line of fire. That night, I wrote in my journal, a habit I'd nearly lost over the years. Note to self, remember this feeling. The sting, the silence, the way they laughed. Remember that next time they call it love. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel angry. Just something shifting inside me, quiet and certain, like a door closing in a long hallway. Before I went to bed, I picked up the mirror once more. Maybe this is the last time I accept humiliation as tradition, I whispered to my reflection. I placed it face down again, turned off the light, and for the first time that night, the house in my head stopped echoing with their laughter. I didn't say anything that night, but a few weeks later, Travis came knocking. The knock came on a Sunday morning, soft but persistent, the kind that carries a certain guilt in its rhythm. I had just poured my first cup of coffee when I saw Travis's car through the blinds, his old Ford, not the new Mercedes. That alone made me pause. He never showed up without texting first and never without a reason. When I opened the door, he looked different, less polished, more human. His shirt was wrinkled, hair slightly unkempt, and there were faint shadows under his eyes. "Morning," he said, forcing a half smile. "You got a minute?" I stepped aside. The smell of burnt toast lingered from my breakfast. He glanced around my small apartment like he was surprised it was neat, as if he'd expected chaos to match his assumptions about my life. "What's going on?" I asked, already sensing this wasn't a casual visit. He exhaled. "I wouldn't be here if it wasn't important." I folded my arms. That's what people always say before they ask for something. He gave a quick, humorless laugh. "Yeah, well, you're not wrong." He rubbed his palms together, looking for the right words. "I'm short on cash. Just for a bit. The company I'm starting, it's this new property venture. Everything's set to go, but I need to bridge some funds until the wire clears. You know how business is." I blinked. "No, actually, I don't." He leaned against the counter. "Come on, Addie. You've got that nonprofit. You're doing fine. I just need a short-term loan. I swear, a month tops. You'll have it back." I wanted to say no right then. The memory of that cracked mirror flashed in my mind. The note, the laughter. I remembered how he'd smiled when Dad said I needed to see myself clearly. Still, I hesitated. Maybe maturity really was doing the decent thing even when it stung. "How much?" I asked quietly. His eyes brightened, hopeful. 10,000. I almost laughed. 10. He raised a hand, already defensive. Look, I wouldn't ask if I didn't need it. The deal's about to close. You'll have it back by next month, maybe sooner. I studied him for a moment. The way he avoided eye contact told me everything I needed to know. But family guilt runs deep, and mine had roots that strangled reason.
Fine, I said.
But one condition. He straightened, relieved. Anything. You don't tell Mom or Dad you borrowed it from me.
Why?
Because I don't want this turning into a dinner story. He nodded quickly. Done. When he left that morning, I felt an ache that wasn't quite regret but close. I wired the money that afternoon and didn't mention it to anyone. No contract, no proof, just trust.
Days passed.
Weeks, even. At first, he texted updates. Almost there. Investors signing soon. Then nothing. Silence has a way of confirming what you already know but don't want to admit. 3 weeks later, I saw his name again, not on my phone, but on Facebook. A post glowing with confidence. Travis in a sleek new office, glass walls behind him, champagne flute in hand. The caption read, "Built not gifted. Every dollar earned." My stomach tightened. Beneath the photo, comments piled up like applause. So proud of you, Travis. Knew you'd make it without any help. Hard work pays off. I stared at the screen for a long time before typing a simple comment. I remember a little help. Within minutes, it disappeared. Then came the text. Please don't start drama. You know how perception matters. Perception. The word sat heavy on my tongue. That was his entire world, what things looked like, not what they were. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my banking app, looked at the transaction, and took a screenshot. A new folder appeared on my desktop that night. Receipts. I wasn't angry, not yet. Just tired in a way that made me older. When Mom called the next evening, her voice was chipper. You should see Travis's office. It's beautiful. He's really found his stride. Makes us so proud. Yeah, I said, forcing a smile she couldn't see. I saw the pictures. He said you've been so supportive, she added warmly. Did he? I stirred my tea, watching the leaves swirl. That's nice. Mom hesitated. He's always admired your heart, Adrian. You've just got to understand him. He's under pressure, you know? Being the one who carries the family name. I wanted to ask when I stopped being part of that name, but I let her talk. It was easier than explaining that her golden boy was rusting. That night, I couldn't sleep. I got up, opened my laptop, and added the text messages to the same folder. Then I wrote down the date of the transfer, the amount, and a note beside it. Paid in full. Not in truth. For weeks, I went about my routine. Work, meetings, church. People there knew me as patient, grounded, the nice one. No one suspected that I was slowly collecting pieces of proof like insurance for my sanity. One evening after dinner, I logged onto Facebook again. Travis had posted a photo of himself standing next to the Mercedes, same one from Christmas, with the caption, "Success isn't given, it's built." The comment section looked familiar. Same praise, same admiration, same blindness. I scrolled through them, heart steady now. I didn't comment this time. Instead, I took another screenshot and added it to the folder. Maybe this is what growing up looks like, I murmured to myself. Helping, learning, remembering. But deep down, something colder whispered back, or maybe it's what finally waking up feels like. A few days later, I met a friend for coffee downtown. She worked in accounting and mentioned casually that her firm was handling some property filings for a new client, Travis Lorne. I smiled politely, sipping my latte. He's ambitious, I said. Always has been. She nodded. He's lucky to have support like yours. Not many siblings would do that. Support. The word tasted bitter, like burnt sugar. I changed the subject. That night, I opened the mirror I'd hidden in my closet. The crack down the middle hadn't spread, but my reflection had changed. I didn't see the quiet, compliant sister anymore. I saw someone watching, waiting, keeping score. Not for revenge, but for clarity. I placed the mirror beside my laptop and looked between them. Two versions of truth. One cracked, one digital. Both sharp enough to cut. Months went by. I didn't ask about the loan again. He never brought it up either. But sometimes, when I drove past that office building downtown, I'd spot the Mercedes parked in front, polished and perfect under the Texas sun. I'd grip the steering wheel tighter and tell myself I wasn't angry, that I'd made peace with being invisible. But peace built on silence doesn't last. It just simmers. And somewhere inside that quiet, I began to record everything. Messages, emails, posts. Not to expose anyone. Just so I wouldn't forget what truth felt like in a family that preferred fiction. Because in my house, perception mattered more than people. And then one day, I opened an old photo album and couldn't find myself in it. It started on a quiet Saturday morning, one of those rare days when the air felt forgiving. I'd promised to drop off groceries for my mother while she and Dad were out visiting friends. The house looked the same from the outside. White brick, blue shutters, a front porch that had seen more staged Christmas photos than real conversations. Inside, though, it felt like a museum of selective memory. Everything smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and nostalgia. I left the grocery bags on the kitchen counter and almost turned to go, but something drew me down the hall. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was that old ache of wanting to see where I used to belong. The attic door creaked when I pulled it open, sending a puff of dust swirling down like gray confetti. I climbed the narrow stairs, each step complaining under my weight. The air was dry, thick with insulation and old paper. Sunlight came through a single round window, slicing the shadows across boxes labeled Travis, school years, family photos, Christmas decor. My name wasn't on any of them. I brushed off a stack of albums, the kind with plastic sleeves that stick to your fingers. The first one was Travis's, his life laid out in glossy perfection. There he was, grinning in his Little League uniform. There he was at senior prom, hair slicked back, hand on some girl's waist. College graduation, then a picture of him holding the keys to his first car, the one Dad had helped him earn. Every page told a story of applause. Then I found the one labeled Family Memories. My chest tightened before I even opened it. The first page showed a family picnic at Lake Worth, Mom, Dad, Travis. My shoulder was in the frame, half cropped, a shadow of me holding a soda can. I flipped through more pages. Birthday parties, holidays, vacations. Sometimes I was there on the edge, blurry or blinking. Other times I wasn't there at all. 6 photos in total, all distant, as if someone was allergic to including me. One photo caught my breath. It was from my high school graduation. I remembered that day clearly. The Texas heat, the itchy gown, Mom's perfume. I remembered standing beside Travis and my parents for a picture before the ceremony. But in this photo, the space where I should have been was gone, cut neatly with scissors. The edges of Travis's arm ended abruptly where my shoulder used to be. It wasn't forgetfulness. It was editing.
My throat went dry.
I sat down on an old trunk and stared at that gap, the white slice where my body used to be. My fingers trembled as I traced the edge of the missing piece. "You erased me," I whispered. The attic didn't answer. It just creaked in sympathy. I closed the album and sat there for a long time, listening to the hum of the air vent. My parents had always said I was too sensitive, that I took things personally. But maybe the problem wasn't sensitivity, it was clarity. I'd finally stopped confusing neglect for love. When I drove home that afternoon, the sun was setting over the Fort Worth skyline. The roads shimmered with heat, and the radio played an old Fleetwood Mac song about time slipping away. I rolled down the window, let the warm wind hit my face, and tried not to think about scissors cutting through photographs. A week later, Mom called. "Sweetheart, could you help out at the church fundraiser next weekend? We're organizing the raffle." I said yes. Maybe I was still that girl, the one who helped because she didn't know how not to. The day of the event, the church hall was packed, tables covered with white cloths, raffle baskets wrapped in cellophane, women in pastel cardigans fussing over desserts. Mom moved through the room like a queen among disciples. Everyone adored her. She had that gentle voice that could make gossip sound like prayer. Halfway through, the pastor took the mic. "We'd like to recognize someone special tonight," he said. Marla Genevieve, for 25 years of service to our community." The room erupted in applause. Mom stood, hand over her heart, pretending to be humble. When they asked her to say a few words, she smiled, radiant under the lights. "I couldn't have done any of this without my family," she said. "My husband, my son Travis. He's been my rock through everything." The audience clapped louder. I waited for my name, or something close. "And of course," she added, still smiling, "my daughter, Michelle, who always supports me behind the scenes." Michelle. Not Adrian. Not even close. A few people turned toward me and smiled politely, assuming she'd just slipped up. I felt my face heat, but I didn't move. I just nodded once, like I agreed that maybe I really was Michelle. It was easier than correcting her in front of everyone. After the applause faded, Mom walked over and hugged me. "Wasn't that lovely?" she said. "Perfect," I replied. On the drive home, I replayed her words in my head. My name didn't sound like me anymore. It sounded like something temporary, replaceable. That night, I sat at my desk with my laptop open, scrolling through every message Travis had ever sent me. The loan request, the promises, the silence that followed. I opened the folder on my desktop labeled receipts and began dragging files into it. Screenshots, bank transfers, deleted comments I'd recovered from memory. Not because I planned to use them, but because I needed proof that I existed in a family that kept trying to delete me. The next morning, Mom called again. "You looked beautiful last night, sweetheart," she said, cheerful as ever. "And everyone loved your lemon bars."
"They were store-bought," I said.
She laughed. "Oh, you're so modest." I hung up soon after. Over the next few weeks, I found myself waking earlier, restless. I started walking in the park before work, breathing in the cold morning air. There's something about being outside alone that makes you feel visible again, even if no one says your name. At work, I buried myself in projects, the hum of my computer soothing in its constancy. Helping other women rebuild their confidence had always been the most honest part of my life. They came into my office broken, doubting themselves, whispering apologies for things they hadn't done wrong. I recognized the look in their eyes. It was the same one I saw in the mirror. One afternoon, while cleaning out my office drawer, I found the cracked mirror again. I'd kept it wrapped in tissue paper, hidden under files. The line across the glass still split my reflection perfectly in half. For a long moment, I just looked. "This wasn't oversight," I murmured. "It was design." I placed it back carefully, face down this time. Later that evening, as the sun fell behind the rooftops, I brewed tea and watched the city lights flicker through my window. The apartment was quiet except for the ticking of the kitchen clock. I thought about Travis, about Mom, about every small cut disguised as kindness. Forgiveness is strange. It sneaks up on you not as mercy, but as exhaustion. You stop needing apologies when you stop expecting truth. I closed my laptop and leaned back, letting the silence stretch. For the first time, I felt the faint edge of peace, not the kind that reconciles, but the kind that releases. The next time my phone buzzed, it was a group text from Mom. "Family dinner next Sunday. We have something exciting to discuss." I didn't respond right away. Instead, I stared at the screen until the message thread blurred. Somewhere deep inside, I could feel the faint stirrings of something new, not anger this time, but detachment. Because when the people who raised you erase you, the only power left is in how you rewrite yourself. I shut off my phone and turned out the lights. So when they asked me to co-sign the next loan, I didn't hesitate, I laughed. By the time summer settled in, Fort Worth was humming with heat, the kind that slowed your thoughts and clung to your skin like regret. I was sitting on the floor of my living room, organizing folders for our women's mentorship program, when the phone rang. It was Mom. "Just a casual dinner," she said, her voice breezy, like we hadn't gone weeks without speaking directly. Nothing formal, just family. It wasn't lost on me that these invitations only came when someone needed something. But I said yes. Not because I was trying to please her, those days were gone, but because I'd learned something about people who only came around when it served them. Eventually, they always asked for too much. That Sunday evening, I arrived at my parents' house just as the sun dipped behind the pecan trees. The yard looked the same, pristine, overmulched flower beds, and the American flag swaying proudly from the porch. I parked behind Travis's black SUV and took a moment before stepping out. Inside, the dining room table was set like a Southern magazine spread, china plates, linen napkins, a roast chicken that filled the room with rosemary and expectation. Marla greeted me with a kiss on the cheek. Travis barely looked up from his phone. Dinner started with polite small talk, mostly between Mom and Dad. Travis offered nothing but the occasional grunt. Then, as soon as dessert was served, he cleared his throat and leaned forward with that rehearsed concern I'd seen 100 times before. "So," he said, cutting into his slice of pie, "I've got an opportunity lined up. Big one. But I need to refinance the business loan to get in on it." I nodded slowly, sipping my iced tea. "The bank's ready," he continued, "but they want a cosigner. You know how banks are. Even with solid projections, they want to see backup." Mom chimed in then, her voice sugar-coated but firm. "Adrian, honey, you're the only one with a stable income. Clean credit. We trust you." There it was. Not a request, an expectation dressed in kindness. I set my glass down carefully. "You want me to co-sign?" I asked just to be clear. Travis looked up at last. "It's just paperwork. They'd never come after you." I leaned back in my chair and let the silence build for a beat. "Absolutely not." The room froze. Travis blinked like he'd misheard. Mom's smile faded. Her posture stiffened. "No," she repeated, like the word had a foreign accent. "No," I said again, slower this time. "No explanation. No justification.
Just.
No." Travis scoffed.
Wow.
"You're really going to be like that?" "Like what?" I tilted my head. He waved his fork in the air. "You're not even using your savings. You just like holding it over people." "That's not what I'm doing," I replied calm. "What I'm doing is protecting myself from being dragged down by someone else's bad planning." Mom put her fork down with a soft clink. "That's not fair, Adrian." "Isn't it?" I turned to her. "Because if we're keeping score, I'd say I've paid my dues." Dad remained quiet, chewing slowly like if he ignored it long enough, it might disappear. "I just thought," Mom began, trying again, "we were past this weird hostility." "It's not hostility," I said, standing. "It's a boundary." I left before coffee was served. Back home, I kicked off my shoes, fed the cat, and tried to settle. The door was closed, but the weight of it lingered. I curled up on the couch with my laptop and a cold seltzer, thinking that would be the end of it. It wasn't. At 10:07 p.m., a text came through. It was meant for Travis, but landed in my inbox instead. "She's playing the victim again," it read. Always so theatrical with her silent defiance. 5 minutes later, another message pinged in. "Oops, that wasn't meant for you. But you really don't have to be so cold." I stared at the screen. No anger, just confirmation. I opened the folder marked receipts, saved the screenshot, and labeled it, "Marla, Guilt Tactic, July." I didn't respond. 2 days later, Travis called. "I just want to understand," he began, tone low like he was doing me a favor. "You've got the money. You're not using it. So, what's the big deal?" "The big deal is it's mine," I said plainly. He sighed heavily, clearly annoyed. "I'm your brother. You'd let me drown?" "I'm not letting you drown, Travis. I'm letting you swim on your own." "You've changed," he said, the phrase people throw at you when you stop being easy to manipulate. "Yeah," I said. That was the point. There was silence on the line for a moment. Then, for the first time, I did something I'd never done with him before. I hung up first. I stood in the middle of my kitchen afterward, staring at my reflection in the microwave door. It was faint, warped, but there I was.
Solid.
Present. Refusing. Later that week, I got a handwritten note from my mother. I hadn't seen her handwriting in years. The card was floral, the kind sold in Christian bookstores with verses about grace. "We don't always say the right thing, but we mean well." Maybe it's time to let the past go. Love, Mom. There was no apology, just a reminder that their discomfort mattered more than my hurt. I placed the card in the same folder, filed under Deflection, August. By then, keeping records wasn't about revenge. It was about refusing to be gaslit again. My memories weren't fuzzy anymore. They had dates, proof, patterns. People like my mother didn't erase you all at once. They did it in small, polite gestures. Misnaming you, forgetting photos, offering you dinner with strings. No one in my family ever called me cruel outright, but they knew how to weaponize disappointment. We just thought you were better than this, they'd say. We're so surprised by your tone lately. But I wasn't surprised anymore. I'd stopped expecting anything else. That week, I made a change to my emergency contact forms at work, removed my family, added my attorney and my assistant instead. Quiet acts of self-preservation. On Sunday, I took a walk by the river before the heat climbed past tolerable. There were families out, couples holding hands, kids chasing ducks. I watched them without envy, just curiosity. I wondered how many of them knew which of their own would be the first to sell them out. I sat on a bench under a shaded tree, pulled out my notebook, and scribbled one sentence across the top of a blank page. No is a complete sentence.
And it was.
But the true erasure didn't come in words. It came in how they made me disappear. They didn't have to say a word to make me vanish. They just stopped including me. A few weeks after that awkward dinner where I'd said no, I opened Facebook while sipping my morning coffee and froze. There it was, an album titled Marla and David's 30th Anniversary Celebration. The thumbnail showed my brother, Travis, in a tailored navy suit, standing at the head of a long banquet table. Behind him, Mom and Dad smiled, surrounded by relatives in pastel dresses, holding champagne glasses raised high. Everyone looked perfectly lit, glowing with self-approval. I scrolled through the photos one by one, my chest tightening. My cousins, their spouses, the pastor from their church, even old neighbors from the cul-de-sac. I could name every single face in those frames except my own. I wasn't invited. I stare at one picture in particular. A group shot in front of a floral backdrop that read 30 years strong. It was the same family portrait we'd taken at Dad's retirement dinner years ago. Except now, the crop was tighter, just my parents and Travis in the center, smiling like the world revolved around them. I remembered standing there when the original was taken, right between them. The space I'd filled was gone, air brushed away as if I'd never stood there at all. They didn't forget me. I murmured to no one. They rewrote the story without me. I closed the laptop and sat still for a long moment. The clock ticked on the wall, unbothered, while the coffee went cold in my hand. I'd thought silence was cruel, but revision was worse. That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed the images in my head, trying to pinpoint the moment I became expendable. Maybe it was the day I stopped saying yes. Maybe it was the day I stopped apologizing for existing. In my family, that counted as rebellion. 2 days later, a text arrived from Mom. Travis mentioned you helped him with something big last year. Thank you. That meant so much to us. The loan. I stared at the message for a full minute before replying. You're welcome. Though no one said thank you back then.
There was no reply.
Just the gray dots blinking, then disappearing. I set my phone down and laughed softly, not the kind of laugh that comes from joy, but the kind that carries disbelief. They always remembered what I gave, but never who I was. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was a resource, a safety net, a name they used when convenient and misplaced when not. Later that week, I ran into a mutual friend from church at the grocery store. She smiled brightly. Oh, Adrian, I saw the photos from your parents' anniversary. What a beautiful party. You must be so proud. I forced a polite smile. Yeah, it looked lovely, didn't it? You didn't make it? I had a scheduling conflict, I lied. But they looked happy. She nodded, satisfied, and rolled her card away, humming to herself. I stood there, staring at the shelf of olive oil like it might offer wisdom. That's the thing about omission. It only hurts when people believe the edited version. That evening, I poured a glass of wine and sat at my kitchen table, laptop open, inbox glowing. A new message blinked from Travis. Hey, just checking in. Things are crazy busy right now. Hope you're good. No mention of the party. No mention of the photos. I typed back. Busy here too. Glad you're doing well. Then deleted it before sending. I didn't need to play along anymore. Instead, I opened a blank document and started typing. It wasn't a letter so much as a reckoning. Dear Mom and Travis, I've spent most of my life filling in the blanks of your stories. I've been the helper, the backup, the extra set of hands. But I've realized something important. I was never actually in the story. Just a supporting role you could edit out without breaking the plot. Going forward, I'm done funding, fixing, or explaining. No more money. No more favors. No more pretending I don't notice the difference in how you treat me. I have proof of every word, every transaction, every time you called me cold for setting a boundary. This isn't a threat, it's a record. Because one day, you'll tell the story again, and you'll need reminding of what really happened. Adrian. When I finished, I read it twice, checking for anger. There was none. Just finality. I didn't send it. Instead, I printed it and folded it neatly into an envelope. On the front, I wrote, in case they forget who I am. Then I slid it into the drawer of my nightstand, beside the cracked mirror I still hadn't thrown away. For a moment, I considered calling them, confronting it all head-on. But what would be the point? In this family, denial was an art form. They'd twist my words into proof of my ungratefulness, call me dramatic for remembering facts. The next morning, I walked to the mailbox and found another envelope waiting for me, cream-colored, Mom's handwriting looping across the front. Inside was a photo from the anniversary party. Just one. She'd written on the back, wish you could have been there. You were in our hearts. My first instinct was to rip it in half. Instead, I studied it. There they were, radiant, framed by roses, glasses raised. The space between Mom and Travis was small, as if they'd leaned closer to fill the gap where I used to stand. In your hearts, I whispered, but not your frame. I tucked the photo inside the same envelope as the unsent letter and closed the drawer. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the air conditioner. Outside, a thunderstorm rolled in, and rain tapped softly against the window. That night, as lightning flickered across the sky, I found myself wondering how many times a person could be erased before it stopped hurting. Maybe that's what healing was, not forgetting, but getting used to being invisible without letting it define you. I spent the weekend cleaning, sorting, putting my life back in order. I deleted photos, old texts, messages I used to read, hoping for warmth. It was almost meditative, hitting remove over and over, taking back control one click at a time. By Sunday, the storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean. I brewed coffee and stood by the window, watching sunlight break through clouds. My phone buzzed. Another text from Mom. Travis said you might still have those financial records from his old project. Can you send them over? He misplaced his copies. Of course. Invisible but needed. I replied. I'll check. Then, after a pause, I added. You know, it's funny how you only remember me when there's a spreadsheet involved. There was no answer. I didn't expect one. That afternoon, I printed one more copy of the letter from my drawer and slipped it into a folder labeled receipts. I wasn't collecting evidence anymore. I was collecting closure. Sometimes self-respect isn't loud. It's quiet and methodical, like sealing an envelope and knowing it doesn't need to be opened to matter. By the time the sun set, the apartment felt lighter. I sat on the couch, a blanket over my legs, the mirror on the coffee table in front of me. The crack down the middle caught the orange glow of evening, and for the first time, I didn't look away. They'll remember me when they need me, I said softly. But I'll remember who I was when they didn't. Then came the meeting, and they brought back the mirror. 2 months after that party I wasn't invited to, my phone lit up again with Mom's name. It was a Thursday evening, late enough that I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in me, curiosity, maybe made me pick up. Adrian, she said, her tone unusually formal. We need to talk. As a family, it's time to clear the air.
Clear the air.
That phrase always meant prepare to be blamed politely. I'm free Sunday, I said, before she could schedule it at their house. You can come here. There was a pause, short but telling. Your place? My place, I repeated. She hesitated, then agreed.
Fine.
I'll bring Travis.
He's
Been wanting to say his piece too. I smiled to myself. Of course he has. Sunday came heavy with humidity. I opened the windows early to let the faint breeze in, then brewed a pot of coffee strong enough to brace myself. By noon, I had set the dining table with 3 cups, not because I expected civility, but because I knew presentation mattered to her. When they arrived, Travis wore the look of a man who thought arriving was a favor. Mom came in first, carrying a tote bag and a polite smile. But what caught my eye was what she held in her other hand, the cracked mirror. She placed it on the table like it was sacred. Let's start from the beginning, she said softly. We think this still matters. I stared at it, that familiar fracture slicing across my reflection. You brought a weapon to a negotiation, I said evenly. Travis laughed under his breath. Always so dramatic. Mom gave him a warning glance, then looked back at me. We didn't come here to fight. Then why bring that? I asked, nodding toward the mirror. It's symbolic, she replied, settling into the chair across from me. We've all made mistakes. The mirror reminds us to look at ourselves. I almost smiled. Convenient philosophy, considering how much you enjoy telling other people who they are. Travis cleared his throat and slid a folder across the table. Actually, this is about business. I've got something new in motion, and I could use your endorsement. Endorsement, I repeated, leaning back. That's a new word for handout. He ignored the jab. It's a community development project. There's a local grant available, but it helps if someone credible signs on as a partner. You've got the right profile, steady, responsible, that whole image thing. You'd make us look good. I let that hang for a moment before asking, why me? He shrugged. Because you've got that clout now. The business world loves a success story, especially a woman who turned her little nonprofit into something respectable. You look professional. A laugh slipped out before I could stop it. You mean I look like someone you can use again? He bristled. Don't make this emotional. It's just business. Everything's emotional when you treat people like tools, Travis, I said quietly. Mom jumped in then, trying to smooth the edges. We all want to move forward. Maybe this could be a fresh start for you both. For us both. I repeated. Mom, he's been rewriting history and cashing checks that were supposed to mean trust. What exactly are we restarting? She sighed, the kind of sigh mothers perfect over decades of disappointment. You've always been stubborn. And you've always mistaken boundaries for rebellion. The silence after that was thick enough to chew. I stood up, walked to my desk, and pulled out a folder of my own. When I came back, I placed it beside the mirror. You brought reflection, I said. I brought memory. Travis frowned. What's this? I opened it and slid the pages toward them. Bank statements, screenshots, photos. Proof, I said simply. Of every time I said yes when I should have said no. Every time you borrowed, deleted, cropped, or pretended I wasn't there. Mom's face tightened. Adrian, this isn't necessary. Oh, it's overdue, I replied. Travis flipped through the pages, color rising in his face. You've been keeping records? Of course. You taught me perception matters, remember? I leaned forward. This is the unfiltered version. The one where I stop existing for your convenience. He pushed the papers away. You're holding on to bitterness. No, I said, voice steady. I'm holding on to evidence. Mom's tone softened, coaxing, almost pleading. We're your family. We don't have to live like this, so divided. I met her gaze. You're right. We don't. Which is why this ends here. Travis scoffed, leaning back. You think you're better than us now? I think I finally see you clearly. I tapped the mirror. Cracks and all. He laughed, but there was no humor left in it. You've really lost it. This isn't who you are. It's exactly who I am, I said. You just never cared to know her. The clock ticked loud behind us. Mom reached for the mirror as if to reclaim the last word, but I stopped her hand. Leave it, I said. You gave it to me, remember? Let it stay where it belongs, between us. They both sat frozen, unsure how to proceed. I could almost see the gears turning in their heads, trying to find the angle, the leverage. For the first time, they found none. Travis finally stood. You'll regret this, he muttered. Maybe, I said, walking them to the door. But at least it'll be my choice to regret. Mom hesitated in the doorway. I hope one day you'll realize we were only trying to help. I gave her a tired smile. And I hope one day you'll realize that's what everyone says right before they hurt someone. When they were gone, the apartment was too quiet. I stood there for a long time, staring at the mirror on the table. The crack caught the afternoon light and sent it scattering across the wall like fractured truth. I gathered their folder, slid it into my desk drawer, and locked it. Then I picked up my own. The paper inside was heavy, dense with history, but my hands felt light. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of being the villain in their version of events. I'd rather be the wrong daughter than the obedient ghost. I cleaned the table, leaving the mirror where it sat. It wasn't just a relic now, it was a record, a reflection of everything they'd tried to distort. That evening, as the sky turned gold outside my window, I poured a glass of water and sat across from it again. My reflection looked calm, composed, unbothered. They brought the mirror. I whispered to my reflection, but I kept the truth. I reached out, turned it face down, and let the silence settle around me like peace. But people like them don't back down, they double down. I thought the mirror would be the final move, the last gasp of their manipulation dressed as sentiment. But people like my family don't lose gracefully. They don't regroup and reflect. They retaliate. Quietly.
Strategically.
In a language made of omissions and carefully crafted silences. 2 weeks passed after the meeting in my apartment. No calls.
No texts.
No offers to circle back. I didn't expect thanks for standing my ground, but I didn't expect what came next either. Sierra called me first. She was my childhood best friend. We'd once shared everything, scrunchies, homework answers, secrets about our first crushes. In recent years, she'd grown closer to Travis. They ran in the same networking circles, same business mixers, same fake laugh parties. Hey, she said, her tone hesitant. You free for lunch next week? Just us. I almost declined out of instinct, but something told me this wasn't just a friendly catch-up. We met at a cafe downtown, one of those modern spots with too much glass and not enough seating. She wore a sleek sundress, hair pulled back into a ponytail that screamed suburban elegance. I hadn't even sat down yet when she launched into it. I've been thinking a lot about everything that's been going on, she said, stirring her iced tea with a paper straw. With your family. I raised a brow. Interesting opener.
She smiled sheepish.
Look, I'm not trying to get in the middle of anything. I care about you both. I care about your family. My stomach tightened. Sierra, just say it. She looked down at her tea, then back at me. I don't want to pick sides. I leaned back in my chair. You don't have to pick a side. You just had to see me. And you didn't. Her eyes watered slightly, but I knew better than to mistake emotion for integrity. We're all trying to keep the peace, she said. No, I said, standing up. You're all trying to keep it comfortable. For yourselves. By the time I got home that afternoon, I was blocked on every social media platform she used. Instagram, Facebook, even LinkedIn. When people say they're neutral, they usually mean they're conveniently aligned with the majority. That Sunday, I received a surprise visit, not from Mom, not from Travis, but from Ellie, my niece. She came bounding up the walkway, ponytail swinging, carrying a handmade card with glitter smeared across the edges.
Y aún Adrien.
Grandma said to tell you about the party next weekend. I blinked. What party? Ellie tilted her head. The family one. At the lake house. There it was again, the message delivered through a child. I smiled and thanked her, waved at her parents across the street, and closed the door behind me. Inside, I opened my phone and messaged Marla. Heard from Ellie there's a party. Should I plan to come? The reply came fast. We figured you needed space. You've been distant. I didn't respond. I didn't argue. I simply took a screenshot, printed it, and slid it into the receipts binder. Labeled, Deflection, Chapter 3. After that, I stopped wondering where I stood. They'd made it clear I was furniture they no longer needed, but would still use for storage when it suited them. That night, I sat at my desk, lit only by the soft amber glow of my desk lamp. I pulled out a legal pad and began drafting something I never thought I'd write. My will. No family members were named as beneficiaries. No sentimental heirlooms passed down. Everything, every asset, every cent, was earmarked for a scholarship fund I'd quietly started for young women coming out of abusive homes and financial hardship. Women like the ones I worked with every day. Women who reminded me of myself before I found the voice no one in my family wanted to hear. I updated my emergency contacts. Removed Travis, removed Mom. Replaced them with my assistant, Brianna, and my lawyer, a woman named Teresa, who once told me, "You can love your family and still choose not to trust them." I updated my power of attorney, changed my locks, made copies of key documents, and stored them in a fireproof safe. I didn't send anyone a notice. I didn't need to explain my boundaries. I just needed to live by them. A few days later, I ran into a woman from church in the produce aisle. She smiled politely. "You weren't at the lake house last weekend. It was lovely." I nodded. "I'm sure it was." She lowered her voice. "Is everything okay between you and your mother?" I smiled. "Everything is exactly as it should be." She didn't ask anything else. Later that night, I poured a glass of red wine and stood by the window of my apartment, watching headlights pass along the quiet street. I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry.
I was. Still.
People say walking away is the brave thing. But what I did wasn't walking away, it was staying. In my body. In my truth. In my life. I didn't disappear. I just stopped shrinking myself to fit inside someone else's expectations. At work, I smiled more. I gave talks at community centers. Women came up to me after, asking how I learned to set boundaries. I told them the truth. I learned it the hard way from people who made me feel like a burden when I asked for respect. I wasn't bitter. I was informed. One afternoon, I received a group text from Mom. Family updates. Please pray for Travis, his project funding fell through. Tough time. There was no greeting. No question. Just a broadcast. I typed out a reply. I hope he lands on his feet. I'm not available to help financially. Then I deleted it. No need to offer anything. They already knew. Instead, I sat down and wrote a new clause in the scholarship's mission statement. For those who were overlooked, not because they failed, but because they stopped being useful. I closed the laptop, sipped my wine, and turned off the lights. Then came the day they needed me again, and this time, I let them feel the silence. 4 years had passed since that Christmas with the cracked mirror, and 2 since the last time I heard my mother's voice. The silence had grown thick, like humidity in July, something you learn to breathe through until you stop noticing it was there. I'd built a life around that quiet. A good life. The morning it all shifted started like any other. I was in my office, the big window overlooking downtown Fort Worth, the air conditioner humming against the Texas heat. My assistant, Brianna, walked in holding a magazine, eyes bright. "You might want to see this," she said, setting it on my desk. The headline read, "The Woman Behind Fort Worth's Quietest Empire." My photo took up half the page. Me in a gray suit, arms crossed, smiling without apology. The article told my story. The nonprofit that had started in a single rented classroom now had branches across 3 states. It talked about mentorship programs, job placements, scholarships. What it didn't mention was that I'd built it in the shadow of being erased. Then I read the line that made me pause. No, my family wasn't involved in the business. That was intentional. The interviewer had asked if my success was a family legacy. I'd smiled and said that sentence word for word. It was true, and now it was printed in black and white for everyone to see. By lunch, the story had gone viral locally. Old classmates were tagging me, former coworkers sending congratulations. I was polite, grateful, but somewhere inside, I braced for the echo. Because people like my family don't stay silent when their image is questioned. The echo arrived that evening, in the form of an email. From Travis Lorne. Subject: job opportunity? I stared at it for a full minute before opening. Hey, Addie. Long time. I saw your article. Congrats, it's impressive. I've been doing some restructuring with my business and could really use someone like you for guidance. Maybe we could meet? I have a proposal that might benefit us both. The audacity made me laugh out loud. Us both, he wrote. The same man who'd once called me selfish for saying no now wanted to share in my credibility. I took a breath, then typed.
Sure.
Let's meet. My office. Friday, 10 a.m. He replied within minutes.
Perfect.
Appreciate you making time. Friday arrived hot and bright. The air shimmered off the pavement as I drove to the office early. I wore a white blouse, no jewelry except a simple gold watch, a small rebellion against the flashiness he worshipped. At 10:02, Travis walked in, punctual in the way only desperation can make a man. He looked older, tanned unevenly, suit a size too tight. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Adrian, he said warmly, extending a hand. You look great. This place, wow. You really did build something. Thanks, I said, shaking his hand briefly. Have a seat. He glanced around, clearly impressed by the office. Modern furniture, soft lighting, plaques on the wall. The success he once mocked now filled the air between us. So, I said, settling across from him, you wanted to talk business. He nodded, setting a leather folder on the table.
Yeah.
Things have been rough. Market shifts, bad partners, you know how it is. I'm starting something new, community redevelopment, grant funded. Real impact stuff. Impact, I repeated, hiding a smile. Yeah, he said, leaning forward. The city's offering incentives for partnerships with nonprofits. They like seeing collaboration. You've got credibility, Addie. The right optics. If we work together, just on paper, it could really help both of us. I tilted my head. Why me? He hesitated. Because you've got the reputation I need. And you look the part now. Professional. Stable. People trust you. I smiled slowly. You mean I look like someone you can use again? Don't make this emotional, he said quickly. This is business. Travis, I said, resting my elbows on the table. Everything with you is emotional. You just rebrand it as business to avoid accountability. He exhaled hard through his nose, trying to regain control. Look, I'm not asking for much. Just your signature. The rest I'll handle. I can cut you in on profits. That's generous, I said. But I don't need your money. He forced a laugh. You've changed. I looked him in the eye.
Yes.
I finally did. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. The clock ticked softly behind me. Then I stood, opened the bottom drawer of my desk, and took something out, a small, old object wrapped in tissue paper. I set it between us. The cracked mirror. He froze. You kept that? Of course, I said. You gave it to me once. Told me to take a good look at myself. I unwrapped it slowly, the fractured glass catching the morning light. So I did. His expression shifted, guilt, disbelief, something between the two. I reached into the same drawer again and placed a single sheet of paper next to it. A letter already signed. I believe in second chances, I said, but not in hiring my gaslighters. He blinked. You're serious. Completely. He opened his mouth as if to protest, but nothing came out. Finally, he stood. I guess I deserved that. I nodded once. You did. He gathered his folder, his pride hanging loose around him. At the door, he turned back. For what it's worth, he said, Mom's not doing well. She talks about you sometimes. I didn't flinch. That's nice. He waited for a sign of softness, but there wasn't any left to find. I turned my chair slightly, enough to make it clear the meeting was over. Take care of yourself, Travis. He left without another word. The door clicked shut, and the room fell into a silence, so deep it almost felt sacred. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the mirror's broken reflection on the table. My face split neatly in two, the woman I used to be and the one I'd become. I reached out, traced the crack gently, then flipped it face down. For years, that mirror had been their weapon, a symbol of my supposed inadequacy. Now it was mine, proof that I'd survived their reflection and made peace with the cracks. Outside the window, the skyline shimmered in the Texas sun. Somewhere below, life went on. Cars honking, people rushing, the world unbothered by my quiet victory. I stood, poured myself a glass of water, and looked out over the city I'd built my new world in. Success hadn't healed the wounds, but it had given me control over the scars. As I turned back to the table, my eyes caught the paper beside the mirror. The rejection letter. I folded it neatly, slid it into an envelope, and sealed it. No anger. No triumph. Just closure. Power doesn't always bring peace. It only closes one door. Power doesn't always bring peace. It just rearranges the noise. The office was quiet the week after I turned Travis away. Staff moved with that soft respect people give when they sense something personal has shifted, but don't ask questions. I liked it that way. I liked the silence. It was mine, finally. A few days later, I came home to find a cream-colored envelope on my doorstep, addressed in looping handwriting I hadn't seen in years. The return label made my heart pause. It wasn't from my mother or from Travis. It was from Grandma May. Except Grandma May had been gone for almost 6 years. I sat down on the couch, holding the letter like it was something fragile. The postmark was dated 2 months before she passed, June 2019. She must have written it knowing it might find me much later. The paper was thin, her handwriting careful but unsteady. The blue ink faded slightly. Dear Adrian, it began. One day, they'll come to you. Not because they've changed, but because they have nowhere else to go. Don't let that fool you into thinking they've grown. You were always the one holding them together, even when they didn't know it. You'll spend much of your life being misunderstood, but that's not a curse. It's a sign you see the world a little clearer than most. Don't harden your heart, but don't hand it back to those who trampled it either. Build something that lasts, something that belongs to you. And when you do, let peace find you there. I didn't realize I was crying until the paper blurred. It wasn't the kind of sob that came with rage or grief. It was softer, the kind that comes from recognition. Someone, at least once, had truly seen me. I folded the letter carefully and set it on my lap. The apartment felt different now. Not empty, but settled, like a puzzle piece had finally clicked into place. The next morning, I brought the letter to the office. Brianna was already there, setting up for our team meeting. She noticed the envelope in my hand. Old family thing? She asked gently. Old wisdom thing, I said, smiling. Worth keeping. She nodded, and we went over the agenda. But that letter kept whispering in my mind all day, a quiet thread of strength beneath the noise of paperwork and planning. That afternoon, as I was leaving, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message was short and signed, but I didn't need a signature. We're a family. Maybe we could rebuild. It was her, Marla. For a long minute, I just stared at the screen. The words were so familiar, the kind she used whenever she wanted to smooth over the past without ever acknowledging it. I typed my reply slowly. I wish you well, but I'm no longer applying for membership. Then I deleted the thread entirely. That was the last time I ever responded to her. A week later, I stood in front of a small group of women gathered in a modest conference hall in Fort Worth. We were launching our new mentorship program, support for women rebuilding after emotional abuse, divorce, or financial manipulation. Faces looked up at me, some eager, some nervous, all carrying the same quiet hunger for change. I began speaking, my voice steady. This space exists for those who were told they were too sensitive, too soft, too small. For those who were erased, overlooked, or asked to shrink. This is where you start writing yourself back in. When the applause came, I stepped aside, humbled. Afterward, we unveiled a plaque mounted near the entrance of the room. It bore the name of the first scholarship, the May Foundation for Renewal. It felt right that Grandma May's name would live on here, in a place that taught women what she had tried to teach me, to build peace, not permission. Later that evening, when everyone had gone, I walked through the quiet halls of our building. The air smelled faintly of fresh paint and possibility. In the lounge, on a simple wooden table, sat a framed object under soft light, the cracked mirror. It had been cleaned, the edges smoothed, the frame polished walnut. Beneath it, a small brass plaque read, "This is not broken. It reflects every lesson I survived." I stood there for a long time, my reflection fractured but whole. I didn't see failure in the crack anymore. I saw endurance, the line between who I was raised to be and who I became. Outside, dusk slipped into night. The city hummed quietly beyond the windows, streetlights flickering on one by one. I gathered my bag, turned off the lights, and walked toward the elevator. As I stepped out into the warm Texas evening, the last of the sunlight painted the buildings gold. My heels clicked softly against the pavement, a rhythm that felt like freedom. People always think growing up means becoming more like your parents, inheriting their habits, their temper, their way of love. I learned that growing up means becoming more like yourself, learning when to stay silent, when to speak, and when to walk away. Sometimes I still imagine what would happen if they showed up again. If they wanted to reconcile, to rewrite the ending. But then I remember Grandma's words. They'd come, not because they'd changed, but because they had nowhere else to go. I'm not bitter anymore, just done being their anchor. The sun sank low behind the skyline, and the air smelled faintly of rain. I thought of all the versions of me that had led here. The quiet child, the accommodating daughter, the invisible sister, the woman who learned that boundaries aren't walls, they're gates. And if they ever look for me again, they'll know exactly where not to find me. Some things don't end with forgiveness. Some things end with freedom. So maybe the real lesson isn't about revenge. It's about remembering your worth when others work hard to erase it. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not to yell, not to fight, but to walk away and build something they can never touch. Have you ever had to distance yourself from the people who were supposed to love you the most? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear how you found your peace. And if this story resonated with you,